In this demo, we'll take a look at how to use a powerful form of automation using ARM templates, which stands for Azure Resource Manager. These are the low-level schemas that represent every resource in Azure, and as such, they can be pretty complex. However, they are really useful when you need to stand up a whole bunch of Azure resources at once, so they're used heavily in automation. I'll show you how to start from a pre-generated template, and then we'll modify it to suit our needs, run it, and finally make sure it worked as expected. ARM templates are the low-level building blocks of automating Azure resources, so they can be fairly cryptic in nature as well. Covering everything there is about Azure Resource Manager is probably an entire course in and of itself, so we'll focus on the happy path for generating what we need for our CDN resources. The best place to start if you need a deep dive into how templates work is by visiting the link shown here. I won't spend too much time talking about what's inside of the template, but if you're curious, be sure to read about it in more depth. Since it would be too time-consuming to start from scratch and explain everything, we'll take advantage of a very useful feature in the Azure portal, and that is copying a templated deployment from a resource group. Let's go into our storage account, scroll down to Azure CDN, and what I've done is I've used this screen to create a new CDN profile, which also created a new endpoint. If I go into my notifications here, we can see that the CDN endpoint was already created a few minutes ago. I'll go up to the overview blade, then I'll click on the resource group, and you can see here that we have a deployment section. Let's click on that. As I've been recording, you can see I've been doing deployments. Let's click on this last one. You can see here that it lists the resources that we created, a CDN profile and a CDN endpoint. Let's go to the template blade here. Okay, there's quite a few things shown in this blade, so let's break it down quickly. On the left, we have a sort of table of contents of our template, which we can use to navigate within it. On the tabbed bar here, there are examples of how to run this template using various tools like the Azure CLI, Azure RM PowerShell SDK, the .NET SDK, and the Ruby SDK. There is also a Parameters tab. Azure has helpfully already created some pre-generated parameters used throughout the template as shown here. You can also see the values that I put in when I requested this deployment. On the very top menu, we have the ability to download the template in raw JSON form for local editing. Let's actually do that now. Azure will collect this template JSON, the parameters template, and some scripts we can use to rerun this deployment with different parameters. Go ahead and open the exported template and extract it to a directory. I've gone ahead and included this ARM template inside the exercise files of the course as a reference, so we'll open it up inside of Visual Studio Code here. Let's open up the template JSON that we saw earlier. The first section here are these parameters. These can be referenced throughout the rest of the template to provide the same values in multiple places, and if we scroll down you can see where they're used. The next section are these individual resources themselves. There are two here, the first being the CDN profile and then the endpoint. This depends on property here is important. Because an ARM template is deployed in a single operation, if resources depend on another resource being created first, you need to use the depends on property to ensure Azure executes them in order. Otherwise, it will not guarantee the order in which resources are made, which could cause failures. If you'll notice here, the actual configuration properties of the resources have been parameterized, which means we don't really need to modify this template. Instead, we can modify the parameters.json file next to it here. Okay, now this is interesting and should look familiar. These are the values we'll pass into the template which Azure will use when deploying our CDN. This is what we'll modify. Let's change the names here to end in ARM to denote our templated deployment. Let's also switch the location to Central US to be closer to where I am. Oh, and we'll make sure to disable HTTP since we only want to support secure requests. Okay, so how do we deploy this now? There are several ways. Included in our template download were some scripts Azure generated for us that we can leverage. The easiest one to go through is the PowerShell script, but if you're on Linux, you're welcome to study the Bash script here too. The .NET and Ruby versions are included as well. The script takes some parameters, including the subscription ID, the resource group name. There's also a resource group location, but since we're using an existing resource group, we won't provide that parameter. You can also see you could specify a different template file path or a different parameters file path. We'll just leave those as the default. Okay, let's try it out in our open terminal here. Okay, it's a little hard to see, but that's okay. Let's jump into the portal to see if we created those resources. Back inside the portal, we can see that there's been a new deployment to this resource group, in addition to two new resources showing up with the ARM suffix. Let's go ahead and click on the endpoint. Looks pretty good, let's test it out. Making sure that we include the static site /index.html, and there we go. We're all set up in a single deployment operation. As you can probably start to see, ARM templates are a pretty powerful way of deploying multiple resources together in a single operation.